And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Huddle, KGUN 9's streaming sports talk show. We come to you every Tuesday at this time. I'm KGUN 9 Sports Director Jason Barr, joined by our main anchor, Pat Parris. Pat, good afternoon. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. A little warmer on my side of the building than on Jason's. He's again in, for whatever reason, a meat locker studio today, but
Got some
drinking
tea.
his tea. Surprised you don't have your sport coat on today.
Because it's a little bit warmer or less cold than it was last week.
Good.
All right, I thought we'd start with the football team. We'll have plenty of time to talk about basketball. We'll do that later in this show, and that'll probably be our lead for most of the winter. But I thought we'd wrap up with U of A football's win. Good win. They needed to win that game. They hit that 5-win total. I thought they were going to win 5. I thought they were going to lose to Washington State and beat ASU. But boy, Pat, that news conference yesterday that Jedd Fisch had, that year-end news conference, it sounded like they just won a January 1st game. He was on top of the world. But it's all context about where they were, where they are now, and where he hopes they will be.
Well, and who can you fault him? That's his style, right? That's his energetic, positive spin style.
Optimistic.
And you know what? 5-7 from one win last year. You were right. I said 4 wins. You said 5 wins. Congratulations. You were right. Arizona had a couple of signature wins. Certainly the win over UCLA will be the one we'll remember most, but you can't forget about the Territorial Cup game. As frustrating as it was and as back and forth it was, they pulled it out. So in when you look at the body of work, you have to be pleased with the direction they're heading. We'll nitpick now about what we think needs to be done, but overall, you have to give them high marks for getting this program at least now ascending instead of continually being on a spiral.
Pat, I don't think it's a nitpick about what has to be done. They have to completely overhaul the defense the way that he completely overhauled the offense in last offseason. I mean, people may not remember, this offense was putrid last year, right? They couldn't score. They couldn't move the ball. This offense took leaps and bounds forward to we had 2 receivers with over 1,000 yards and maybe even a freshman All-American with Tedero McMillan. He has to go and overhaul the defense like he did the offense, and I think he will, because you heard him say yesterday, there's going to be one more year of big roster turnover before it normalizes. So I think we are going to see him in the offseason go to the transfer portal, a little bit of high school recruiting, a little bit of freshmen improving to sophomores like Jacob Manu. But I think we're going to see that. That's what Fisch needs to do this offseason, is a total rework of the defense. And I'll say one other thing about the defense. Fisch is not the type of coach who's going to fire an assistant or have that type of culture or anything after one bad year. But the defense did take a step backward, right? And if they don't improve next year, okay, he might be forced to do something where it would come from above. I don't want to go there right now, but the defense has got to improve in the offseason.
They do, Jason, but that's where my biggest concern comes in, because we know what Jedd Fisch can do recruiting offensive players. He proved it. And we also know that it's an easy sell when you come from the NFL and you've been an assistant coach and you promise guys that this is going to happen and this is going to happen on offense. And he delivered, and so did a lot of his players on the offensive side of the football. I'm really concerned about whether he can do that sales job on the defensive side of the football with no real credentials to back that up on his part, and no proof that Arizona has had a good defense since the 1990s. So, how are we going to sell a program? How is Jedd Fisch going to sell a program without that kind of cachet built up, or that at least experience?
Well, you're going to sell it.
Climb on my back. We can do this. That's what he did offensively. I'm very concerned that they're not going to get transfer portal guys, 4-star athletes out of California, to all want to come here to play defense at the University of Arizona.
Well, the transfer portal guys are going to play. So that's the selling pitch he has is, hey, listen, you're going to play here. We're losing a bunch of guys, and we have some other guys who don't have guaranteed jobs. So that's the selling point. What he did on the offense last year.
They can play at a lot of schools. There are a lot of schools that guys can transfer to. So why Arizona? How can you sell me on this like you could as an offensive guy? You sold offensive players.
Right. So what you sell is, okay, we went from 1 to 5, right? Now it's the defense's turn to improve. You're the missing link. We need you, and that's his selling point. And, he can use some of the guys currently on the team to help sell it. Hey, look at this guy who did the transfer portal. Look how he did. coming over here. So that's what that's his job. That's what he's going to have to do.
Right.
It's going to have to be a team effort. Johnny Nansen, the defensive coordinator, that's who I was referring to earlier. He's got to bring some people from California and from other schools. Fish was also asked about going the JUCO route, and he said, well, it's tougher for JUCO players now because JUCO players now have to compete with guys in the transfer portal who don't have to sit a year out. But what you are seeing is a lot of guys are going to be in the transfer portal. They've got to get some of them. They've got to improve that defense, and they've got to do it also with freshmen coming in too.
You got to hope that a player like on the defensive side of the ball, like Jaden Delore, you've got a guy that sees all of a sudden maybe he's not going to get the playing time, and he gets playing time at Arizona. I just wish there was a dynamic personality on the defensive side of the ball that could bring guys in like Jed Fish is on the offensive side of the football. But maybe Jed Fish, maybe you're right. Maybe he's got enough built up now with 5 wins and the program turned around, and an ability to beat a team like UCLA certainly helps. And we'll see. I'm just a little concerned that it's not going to come as quickly as it on the defensive side as it did on the offensive side.
I think going into next year, I'll take 6, but I'd be happier with 7 wins.
They got to get to a bowl game now. That's my next step as a bowl game. Even if it's not a big bowl, they just got to get to a bowl. You got to make continued progress each year, because we've seen before, this program, unfortunately, over the last 20 years, goes up and then it goes right back down, or it goes up and kind of levels off, and then it starts to kind of go back down. And so be a great time for the ascent to continue next year. And speaking of that, I want to get a little nitpicky. There's still, as great as that offense was at times, there's still a lot of room for improvement there, Jason. It's the consistency factor. It's still the red zone issues, although against ASU, which was, boy, ASU, you talk about Arizona defense not being very good. Arizona State's defense was not very good either. But there's got to be some consistency issues in the red zone for that offense. You've got to see Jaden Delore even become more consistent. Some of the interception troubles he had cost him in Washington State, cost him against Cal, cost him against, a couple other games that you thought maybe they could win along the way. And then just guys getting a year older and the problem becomes there's not enough footballs to go around for all those receivers and tight ends. That's the one issue. And maybe that works itself out eventually as well.
Well, as far as the offense, the big question now is whether or not Michael Wiley returns. You'd like to think he will. And by the way, my thoughts on Trenton Bourguet, the ASU quarterback, Pat, I thought he did fantastic until he started flopping at the end. This is not World Cup. I don't know. You were at the game, so you may not have seen some of the TV replays. He did a couple of flops to try to get penalties.
I also think
stop flopping.
He also
on the game. You're doing fantastic.
They also started getting a little pressure on him. He was on time, on schedule for 3/4 of that game, and then when Arizona started to get a little bit more pressure on him, I thought he was shaking a little bit. And you talk about the flopping. I think that was part of it too. He got off schedule. And in his own mind, I think he lost where he was going with running that offense. And I think credit the Arizona defense for a little bit of that. The pressure of the game perhaps was a little bit of that. But you're right. For 3/4 of a little more than 3/4 of a game, he was the best quarterback on the field. You and I texted about it. I thought he was the better quarterback.
I did too. That's why I texted you. I thought he was out. I thought he was outplaying Jaden Delore. That's
he was until crunch time, and then when the chips were down, Arizona defense actually made some plays, and Arizona State turned the ball over, and that was the difference.
Before we get to U of A basketball, what do you think about ASU hiring a 32-year-old as its head football coach? Call me old-fashioned. I'd rather hire a 70-year-old than a 32-year-old and get all the experience and wisdom from a 70-year-old. You hire somebody 32 years old, they better be a future great star, because you're going to have to live with a lot of mistakes and a lot of experience on the job. Somebody who's never been a coach is 32 years old. That's all I'm saying. He better be the next great, 20, 30-year coach at ASU, and you better have identified that correctly. And you're not just hiring him because it's a nice story and he went there and it's home and all that. That's all I'm saying. I don't know a lot about Kenny Dillingham. I'm just saying you're going to have to live with a lot of rookie mistakes. Nobody coming into Power 5 job at 32 is going to go in there and not make a bunch of mistakes.
Yeah, you look at new blood over old blood. That's what ASU is probably going for in Dillingham. Is they're thinking, okay, we've got a guy who's an ASU guy. Don't forget, he's
and
an
they want
ASU
to
guy.
excite the fan base. They don't want a guy in his third stint in his coaching.
Right,
I get it.
right. But he's got the Oregon, little mystique of being a Oregon.
1 year? How long was he there?
Yeah, not very long.
Come on.
But I would agree. I am having a hard time remembering a 32-year-old head coach, first of all, starting at a Power 5 program, but succeeding at a Power 5 program in his first stint. So many coaches, have to rise through the ranks, before you get a job. You might have to be at one of those mid-major kind of programs in order to kind of elevate to that. I'm in agreement. I'm not so concerned about that. There'll probably be a little bump in their recruiting, but I wasn't real disappointed in the hire. As being somebody who despises ASU, I wasn't disappointed in the hire. Go right ahead, see if it works. Good luck to you.
Yeah, well, time will tell for that for sure. All right, let's go to the U of A basketball. A lot of good, and then Pat, actually, I came away with that Maui Invitational with a couple of big concerns. We shouldn't start with that because they won the Maui Invitational. Let's start with that guy right there, Umar Ballo. A year and a half ago, this guy was a project. Now he's the Pac-12 Player of the Week. He's on Andy Katz's National Player of the Week, and he dominated. People don't use the nickname for him, Baby Shaq, anymore, but he almost looked like a Baby Shaq in there. He was dominating. And, he plays with a smile, and he's got a good personality and the whole thing. A tremendous job for them to be 2 ranked teams. Big surprise that they jumped up 10 spots. I guess that's also some teams losing for them to go all the way to number 4. I didn't see that coming, but they made a big jump in the rankings. And crazy to see Houston ranked number 1. Of course, Houston beat them in the Sweet 16 last year. That Houston team was underrated all last year. Never should have been 6th seed or whatever they were in the NCAA tournament.
Right.
That was nuts. But back to the win. We saw it in the first couple of games for U of A basketball when they passed the eye test and they were blowing the inferior teams out of the gym. They've got a terrific offense. These players who Tommy Lloyd brought in, who we really aren't that familiar with, or weren't that familiar with, a Courtney Ramey and a Cedric Henderson Jr. These guys can play. These guys can do so much more than score. And terrific job for Arizona to go into Maui and get those 3 wins, 2 of them against ranked teams.
Yeah, and you see this team come together so quickly, Jason, and we saw it last year. And obviously, you have to credit Tommy Lloyd and his staff. This was a team that had to, make up for their top 3 players all going to the NBA. And you get a Courtney Ramey coming in, and you get this new injection with Azuolas Tubelis and Pella Larson, and they do seem to have meshed fairly quickly. And they were impressive. I know that there were a couple of those games that maybe got a little tighter at the end, and that was something that you don't like to see. And they were able to hang on, and the poise needs to, they need to become a little bit more poised and have the ability to handle the pressures of the games in the closing minutes. But they got the win, so that's the most important part of it. I was surprised they jumped from 14th to 4th. But then as you mentioned, Jason, if you look around, you see North Carolina lost twice. You see Gonzaga lost again. You understand why they jumped up. And I don't know if you noticed, you see Creighton actually went up a couple of spots as well. So they went from like 9th to 7th, I think. So I believe what the voters were saying is that was a pretty loaded field in Maui. And the 2 teams that made the championship game deserved to be in the top 10. And the one that won it deserves to be a top 5, in this case, the 4th best team right now at the end of November. And I think they look like definitely a top 10 team. We'll see how that shakes out. And real quick about Houston, you're absolutely right. 1983 was the last time Houston was ranked number 1. And for those of us that remember how great that team was, but this is a team that we knew last year going into that tournament that Houston was disrespected. They played like it. They beat Arizona, and now they're by all looks, they seem to be better than they were last year. That's a scary bunch there at Houston.
By the way, little personal story here. I was a little boy in March of '83 when NC State was about to play Houston in the national championship game. And I grew up on the East Coast, so the game's too late. I just didn't want to see NC State get beat. I thought they were going to get blown out in the game. I didn't want to see it. I'm like, okay, I'll just go to bed and find out the next morning. I couldn't believe NC State won that game. That's the team for Houston that had Akeem Olajuwon and Clyde Drexler and Benny something or other. Was a great college player, not a great NBA player, but two Hall of Famers on the team, and they just jumped you out of the gym. And of course, the game was in Albuquerque, and Drexler got in foul trouble on a bad call, and Olajuwon got tired of the altitude. And NC State, this is a great story. Anyway, all right. So let's
great fun.
So, all right. So let's get. I'm going to give you the two concerns I have, and I want you to address them.
Okay.
I want one bigger than the other. The first one, which isn't as big, because it can be corrected, is the 3-point defense. Not so much the percentage, just guys wide open. I don't know if it's defensive switches or what. I'm concerned. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, we saw a little of that last year at times, too. Teams that got hot shooting the three were able to hang around with Arizona a lot longer than teams that weren't. And part of that's the help defense. I mean, all of it's the help defense. You appreciate the fact they swarm to the ball, they get some help, they shut down that, but it leaves guys wide open. So that'll be addressed. They need to be smart about when they double team, when they come and help out. You can't leave 3-point shooters, pure 3-point shooters wide open. And that's what they did several times.
Uncontested
in
shots. Okay. Now here's the bigger one, because this one, I'm not sure how it gets fixed at this point. There is a glaring lack of depth in the front court. Okay. He's going one person more deep in the backcourt because Lloyd is playing both Adama Ball and Kylan Boswell. But in the front court, he didn't give it Dylan Anderson any minutes. Henry Visar looks like a freshman. He's soft. He's finesse. Tubelis and Ballo are fantastic. But what happens if one guy gets into foul trouble? That's already happened. What happens if somebody gets hurt? Good Lord. I would have given Dylan Anderson, who was the Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year the last 2 years, a couple of minutes, just the way that he gave Kylan Boswell and Adama Ball and went 9 deep because he went an extra guy in the backcourt. I would have found a way to give Dylan Anderson a couple of minutes. Now, we don't know. We don't see practice. We don't know what's going on. We don't know why Dylan Anderson isn't playing. But I was very concerned about going up against now a very physical team and having the lack of two terrific players, but having just a total lack of depth in the front court. What are your thoughts on that?
I will say this. While I'm with you that Henry Vesar has not, really dominated a game yet, and hasn't even for minutes shown what I think a lot of people believe, and I'm one.
He doesn't have to dominate a game. He has to come into the game and, and make you not miss Tubelis or Umar Ballo. But that's what he has to do.
It'd be nice for him to stand out in a positive way during his limited, or his minutes that aren't as big as the starters are, obviously. I think that's by design, though, is they're getting him those minutes. They're getting him important minutes. They expect him to make a quick ascension in his skill level and his ability to play, just like Umar Ballo made. Remember, Umar Ballo, we talked about how they're blowing out teams early last year and they passed the ice. Umar Ballo was struggling. He was maybe non-existent or wasn't a dominant player. And then as the season progressed, fairly early in the season, I'll give you that. By the time we were around Pac-12 play, he started earning more and more minutes. And then eventually, remember, he and Koloko sometimes even were on the court at the same time.
Well, it happened by necessity because Koloko got hurt. Yeah. Koloko got hurt, and that's what got Umar Ballo into the lineup, and he was fantastic.
Right.
Pat, so by the way, Jason Barr, Pat Parris here on the Huddle, KGUN9 streaming sports talk show. But the difference, Pat, is that Umar Ballo has a legitimate developed physique, and Henry Visar, I want to call him Henry, and Henry Visar is his skin is super skinny. He doesn't look the part.
And he's going to be a different player. He's not going to be the same kind of 7-footer as Umar Ballo is, but he has the potential to be a rebound guy. He has the potential to be a scorer inside, and he also can hit the three that you're never going to want Umar Ballo to shoot a three. He can shoot the three. He's a European type player. He's going to have to figure out that you've got to bang a little bit more in there. You've got to be a little more physical. He's going to get knocked off. He can't just expect to be able to be 7 feet and reach up and grab a rebound when guys are pushing him out of the way. He's going to have to learn. And I have a lot of confidence in Tommy Lloyd and that staff to help him learn, but he's going to have to learn pretty quickly because you're right. The depth there, they need him to be a significant minutes guy, and they need him to be significant in his abilities to rebound and score.
Yeah, I'd love to know why Dylan Anderson isn't playing. I don't know.
I'm not sure unless
if he was asked that.
and
I did not expect him to two-time Arizona Gatorade Player of the Year to ride the bench the whole season. I thought we would see some minutes from him. Next time I'm in a news conference, I'll ask what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, certainly he has more of the physique. He's a little more filled out, and he'll probably get even bigger. Will Dylan Anderson? But I don't know. I mean, they're the ones that see him in practice. I'm not gonna. I'd be interested to see what Tommy Lloyd has to say about their plans for him, Dylan Anderson, and why we don't see him more. But I think they believe that Vesar is the better player and deserves more minutes. But he's got to show it, Jason. I agree with you. He's got to show it. I
needed a little bit more out of him. Wasn't a great Maui for Pelle Larsson. Look, all 9 guys in a rotation aren't gonna play well.
I thought he played better against Creighton, though. I thought we saw a little glimmer of him getting back, and you never know what's going on sometimes.
Yeah, no. So Pac-12 2 Pac-12 games this week, and then they go to Las Vegas for that little event there where they play Indiana and then another team after that. So. The schedule now much different, and these are the types of teams that you want to see them play and how they do. So I'm looking forward to. I didn't realize it was Thursday night on the road, and then they come back Sunday.
Yeah, they're here at McHale on an odd Sunday 3:00 game against a Pac-12
Cal
team
Sunday,
Cal.
Thursday at Utah. Yeah.
But I like. I mean, it's interesting how they go to Maui. I appreciate the fact they gave them a little time off because. I saw something written in the paper about, each coach has tried different things coming out of that Maui Invitational, and rarely does it work playing very quickly after that. So they gave them a little bit more time off. But then they do road, then Utah, then home against Cal, and then as you mentioned, they go. What is it in Vegas that they play Indiana? And so
that's right. Arizona's never played Indiana before.
It not only is not only is that really cool that they're going to be playing Indiana. But that they go to Vegas, that's kind of the home away from home for Pac-12 teams. And, and at the same time, it's not very far for us to get to Vegas. I like that. I like the variety of the schedule so far this year.
By the way, are you following Xavier basketball at all with Sean Miller out of curiosity?
I saw highlights of a couple of their games. They were just in a tournament too. Were they in the Phil Knight tournament?
They beat Florida, lost to Duke, and lost one other game to a top team.
Yeah.
So they're 4-3, but the 3 losses are to very, very strong opponents. I'm just curious, it just seems like people in Tucson don't really follow a coach that was here for a while when he's gone. I just get that feeling. I don't have anybody stop me in the grocery store asking about how Rich Rodriguez is doing at Jacksonville State or anything like that. And when I show it a couple of times on the news, I even get a comment like, well, we don't care. Well, they're not here anymore. I don't know. It's just to me, it's kind of interesting how they're doing at their next stop. Any thoughts on that?
No, I think you're right. I've done the same thing. I've been, hey, why don't we show, show how Rich Rod is doing it? It's like, you don't really get much interest.
Yeah.
I think with Sean Miller, there might be a little interest too, because we're still waiting for that final shoe to drop from the NCAA.
So is he.
And will it follow him? Will he miss 10 games? Will he miss the rest of the season? Or will he not be punished at all? We don't know. I think that'll be an interesting storyline once that comes down. I think you and I both believe this. If the NCAA selection committee can have Arizona play Xavier in the first round of the tournament, they're going to do it.
That'd be something. I thought of that too. I think I don't want to get into the whole investigation thing, but I do think, and I could be mistaken here, that the longer this drags on, the less the punishment's going to be.
Oh, yeah.
There's got to be a statute of limitations at some point. We're past 5 years now, and there's nobody here.
And nobody's still involved with the program at all.
The program was totally punished because of what they did and recruiting and missed the whole thing. I think that Tommy Lloyd's bracing for a scholarship or two being taken away.
And remember, he told us they've been holding back a scholarship or two already these 2 seasons, saying so that they can say we already did that. That's the one thing the NCAA allows you to do. You can kind of hold back a scholarship for a couple of seasons, and then when they say you lose a scholarship for 2 seasons, you say we already did, and they say okay, you're good. That may be a plan that works out perfectly for them.
I do tune in, go to Xavier's social media and their website to see how they're doing occasionally. I'm just curious. It just kind of seems like a fit there. I know fans here have moved on and the whole thing. It's interesting to me. It just doesn't seem like it's interesting to everybody else. But I tell you what, if Xavier's got a primetime game and we've got some time on the news to show, I'll show how he's doing. Let's check in on Sean Miller. I think it's kind of interesting, but
yeah, I do too. There's not quite the animosity sometimes you get when you depart, coaches. I think people were a little surprised that Sean Miller kept his job when they first started hearing of the allegations. He did, and then eventually he didn't. So I personally, I like to see where Sean Miller's at and what he's doing, but that maybe just isn't for everybody.
Yeah. All right. So that does it for the Huddle this week as we come up here on the bottom of the hour. What's today? Last Tuesday in November.
Hey, we should mention real quick as just before we came on air, as we do it live on a Tuesday, the U.S. just won their soccer match against Iran and move on to the round of 16, the knockout round, and play Netherlands.
But Christian Pulisic left the game with an abdominal injury.
He did. You hope maybe that's not something that'll linger on to Saturday. They have till Saturday now. He did come back and play. He continued playing in the game for a little bit. They took him out at halftime, but that was a heck of a goal. And you running right into the goalkeeper. I understand. That happens sometimes when you get hurt.
Yeah, I tell you what, Iran almost tied it up there at the end.
I know they
could have been called a foul there in the box. That was close. They didn't call it. That could have set up a penalty kick and 1-1. So U of A advances. They scored 2 goals in 3 games. And
they scored 2 goals in 3 games. That's all you had to do. Iran had to get a draw at least, and they didn't. But you're right. It almost ended, and that would have been heartbreak for the U.S. and Iran would have advanced for the first time in their history. But instead, it's USA and an opportunity, Jason, to make the quarterfinals. For the first time in almost 20 years, last time we made the quarterfinals. So
I'll have to do some homework on the Netherlands. I don't know where Netherlands soccer is off the top of my head, but
they won their group. That's all I know.
Well, there's something to be said for that. So we'll have to check.
But
that
this
out.
Is as talented as a team as we've seen in a long time for the
US.
It's
a young team, and that's why
but it's young and talented, and getting a great experience on the world stage and setting the table maybe for great things to come.
Would that be nice?
Yes.
All right. For Pat Parris, I'm Jason Barr. This has been the Huddle on this Tuesday, last one in November. We'll be right back here next week at this time and talk U of A basketball for sure, and some other things, World Cup maybe as well, as the Wildcat men's basketball begins their conference season. I also should have mentioned U of A women's basketball rolling right along. Haven't been tested yet. That'll come. They haven't been tested yet like the men. That'll come. Kaylin Gilbert playing well, and we'll get into that. We've got plenty of time between now and March. So for Pat Parris, I'm Jason Barr. This has been the Huddle on KGUN 9. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you right back here next week.